Iranian President Ebrahim Raisi and Foreign Minister Hossein Amir-Abdollahian have died in a helicopter crash. Their helicopter went down in the mountains close to the Azerbaijan border. Reports so far say the crash was due to bad weather, but it's also sparked speculation as to Raisi's convoy having 3 helicopters, the other 2 helicopters that reached their destination safely, but the president's helicopter crashed. Now, given the president's controversial tenure and Iran's internal and external challenges, questions are being raised and sabotage can't be ruled out. So we're first looking at the 5 air crashes that have altered history. We begin with the 1961 air crash of Dag Hammarskjöld, the then Secretary General of the United Nations. Now, his plane was supposedly shot down as it prepared to land in what is present-day Zimbabwe. 1971, Lin Biao, who was China's second-in-charge, successor to Mao, died in a plane crash while fleeing after attempting to assassinate Mao. And in 1988, we have President Mohammad Zia-ul-Haq, the military dictator and president of Pakistan. He died when his C-130 Hercules aircraft nosedived and exploded on impact at Chaklala Air Base in Pakistan. That mystery has still not been solved until today. And finally, in 2010, President Lech Kaczynski of Poland, 96 people were killed in the crash along with him. The investigating report said it was not an accident, but an assassination. That's another unexplained air crash. And finally, we have President Ebrahim Raisi of Iran, who died in a helicopter accident on the border with Azerbaijan. His helicopter went down in the mountains close to the border. To discuss President Raisi's crash and the impact on world politics, let me start by introducing my guests for the show. Joining me to discuss this today are Dr. Waeil Awwad, West Asia expert, Pathikrit Payne, and my colleague Aditya Raj Kaul here in the News9 Plus studio. Gentlemen, welcome to the News9 Plus show. Aditya, I want to start by asking you this. Iran is on the horns of a twin dilemma. It needs to find a successor for Supreme Leader Khamenei, and it needs to find, on the short term, a successor to President Raisi. How is it going to cope with this twin dilemma?
Well, it couldn't have come at a worse time, really, Sandeep. As we have been following this very closely over the last 6 to 7 months, Iran has been closely engaged and particularly focused towards Israel completely.
Right.
It has been focused on, supplying arms, giving money, and morally trying to support the proxies in the region, the 3 major proxies, including Hamas and Hezbollah. So the question now is multifold. As you rightly pointed out, the internal political dynamics of Iran, how will that put into place? Because Ebrahim Raisi in many ways was seen as a successor of Khamenei as well.
Right.
So how will they replace that? The consistency in their politics, in their external foreign policy as well, will they be able to give the kind of leadership that Iran really needs? These are some of the questions that people in power in Iran will have to answer. The executive vice president, who is now the president, acting president of Iran till the elections happen in the next 50 days, will have to take things under his control. We also have the deputy foreign minister now becoming the acting foreign minister. As I said, this without even doing anything, this seems to be like a strategic victory or a strategic upmanship for Israel in the region.
Absolutely.
So we'll have to wait and watch how things really unfold, but this will be a tough time, not just for Iran, but for the world as well, because oil prices are already shooting up.
Yes.
And if the conflict in this entire region escalates further, this fuel price hike in the entire globe is going to skyrocket really.
Absolutely. Dr. Waeil Awwad, we were looking at the 5 air crashes that actually changed world history, and these are air crashes of sitting presidents, heads of state, UN Secretary Generals who were, who died at very crucial times in their nation's history. Like you have President Zia-ul-Haq, the Secretary General Dag Hammarskjöld, and of course President Kaczynski of Poland. Yeah, and you have just yesterday the President of Iran going down at a moment, at the possibly one of the most crucial moments in his country's history. How important is this event going to be in Iranian history when you look at it from 1979 to present date, and how will Iran cope with this twin crisis as we discussed? Finding a successor to the supreme leader Khamenei, and also in the short term to find a successor to President Raisi? Dr. Awwad, your comments.
Thank you. I think I'll add more to the list you have already mentioned, which is since 1957, from Guatemala to the Latin American states into Southeast Asian nations, followed into South Asia, and then into the UN officials in the Middle East. All this shows the involvement of a state in assassination attempt to cut out some of the leaders, which they are not towing into their lines.
Right.
But having said that, I wouldn't rule out currently of the President Raisi getting killed. This now could be a human error, could be the weather, could be the machines. There is some defect in the aeroplane, which is quite old. The helicopters. There could be any reason there, but I don't see at the moment any sort of a conspiracy on getting him removed until we get the full investigation of the black box and the circumstances surrounded this incidents. Because, being a president of a country, I mean, the weather should have been one of the prime priorities for any flight to do, and especially in a border with Azerbaijan. But, remember Azerbaijan having a very adverse relation with Iran for recent time. And I think that the inauguration of the dam was one of the important parts to re-establish the relations. Israel have a strong, the largest intelligence base in Azerbaijan, and we were anticipating even Israeli sabotage through Azerbaijan before the 7th of October.
Right.
But in terms of the internal affairs, this is also, remember, this is not the first time that Iran have been facing such a kind of internal turmoil. This is the third time the president of Iran in 1981, 80 and 81, they have removed two presidents. One was killed and one was removed, and then there was a vacuum, but it was immediately filled. The reason for filling, because the supreme leader of Iran is having the prime saying in any affairs. So as per the constitution of Iran, and as per the law of 131 article of the constitution, the vice president, who is Muhammad Mukhbar, will be taking over now as the current the caretaker president, and the foreign minister also has been named. So I don't see any internal problem for Iran at all, because that is what the supreme leadership has to do. There was a talk of a supreme leadership alternative to Khamenei, because he's getting old. Even Raisi was one of the priority on the list, including his son as well. But the problem he is still kicking and high in power. So I don't see any immediate crisis. However, we have to find out what could be the fallout of his death if it is a sabotage.
Right, absolutely. No immediate crisis, Dr. Waeil Awwad says, and that would be seen with a lot of relief in New Delhi, because we just inaugurated a port there, India's first overseas port managed by India. Pathikrit, why does Iran matter so much to India? Could you just tell us at this particular juncture, when we have kind of in the face of US opposition, we've taken on this port Chabahar, why does Iran matter so much to India's foreign policy?
So first of all, Sandeep, let's look at it from the perspective of what happened in 2017-18 when the CAATSA sanctions came in, countering the American Adversary Sanctions Act. India ensured that even though it reduced, import of oil from Iran to near zero, they ensured that, there's a concession on the Chabahar port.
Yes.
So today you have a 10-year-old agreement. The purpose of the Chabahar port, the criticality is not just about sending some wheat or other food grains to Afghanistan. It's a critical inflection point for the INSTC, International North-South Transport Corridor. Now, if you look at the entire route which is currently taken for any kind of commodity shipment or energy shipment from Russia to India, it comes through the North Sea, Baltic Sea, Mediterranean, Suez Canal, and then the Gulf of Aden. So, if you want to bypass that and take a multimodal transport network that was been created as part of NSTC, which will consist of a railroad, a road, and then sea lanes. Chabahar was a very critical part of that. It would reduce the cost and the time of shipment of goods and service commodities from Russia to India and vice versa by 30 to 40%. And you have an entire gamut of countries in this entire belt consisting primarily of the Central Asian countries. you literally can create a bloc, an economic bloc, which will be at par with something else, sans the Western countries.
Right.
Let me also tell you, many of these countries are already under sanctions from the Americans, so they would not have problem with, say, a de-dollarized or any kind of transaction without the dollar. They are already doing. India has been doing with Iran. India is doing with Russia. So let me tell you why for India, India has taken a very different approach when it comes to Iran. I think one of the most important reasons why you have so much trouble in the Middle East is because of the obsession that some of the Western countries have in terms of cornering Iran, sanctioning it, ensuring that it cannot trade with its oil, it cannot prosper. Now, I think from the Iranian perspective, I'm not saying they are a holy cow. They have this obsession and hardline of destroying Israel, which doesn't make sense. But from the Iranian perspective, I think they have made it very clear, if they cannot prosper, if they are not made part of any economic bloc, they will not allow anyone else to prosper as well. And that's the reason the Houthis are creating problem in the Gulf of Aden. That's the reason you see Hezbollah and Houthis, everybody is creating problem, not just for Israel, but for Saudis, but for the UAEs and everybody else. So I think the Indian approach has been that let us create a better scenario where we have good relations with the Sunni Arab bloc, and Israel to India, Middle East, Europe economic corridor, and at the same time give some concession to the Iranians so that they can also become part of a bloc and ensure they can also prosper. Because if you corner them beyond the point, it is becoming counterproductive for the whole world. For a country like India, which imports so much of energy, any kind of vulnerability in Middle East has a tremendous impact on us.
Pathikrit, I'm going to interrupt you. I'll bring Aditya in on this. Aditya, what Pathikrit just mentioned, the fact that how Iran is really important to New Delhi because of various reasons. Energy is one of them, and the INSTC, the North-South corridor to Russia and of course to Afghanistan is important as well. How would New Delhi be looking at this, the unfolding crisis in Iran? Of course, Prime Minister Modi has come out in support of the people of Iran, but what is the kind of regime change that New Delhi would want? What is the kind of leadership that we would want in place in Iran to ensure that our interests are advanced in the coming years?
Well, New Delhi, of course, would want a democratic kind of a setup in Iran, which is, focused on helping the people of Iran really, instead of the radical moves that Khamenei and the president have been really taking over the years. But having said that, both the Prime Minister of India and the External Affairs Minister have expressed their shock and sadness at the demise of these top leaders. This is also a time, perhaps, what happened during the Russia-Ukraine entire war, when the oil was brought into India and India sold it off to the entire world. Similar things can be happening now, which has been already happening. Sanctions, of course, are in place, and there have been warnings that have been coming in from the US, but India will do whatever it has to. It has robust bilateral ties with Iran. It has strategic partnership with Israel. I think India would be monitoring this very closely. New Delhi will be trying to see how this conflict that has been underway over the last 7 to 8 months either gets into kind of a slow demise or will continue, and perhaps the kind of internal chaos in Iran could further lead to kind of uncertainty in this entire region. I think Israel also would be closely monitoring how the transition of power really happens in Iran, because that will directly impact not just Iran, but the entire region and the entire globe. Looking at oil prices, looking at how big this conflict is going to continue, because this has been a never-ending war really in Gaza, and the proxies haven't really ended striking at Israel and its partners.
Dr. Awwad, you just heard Aditya Raj Kaul talking about the expectations from various countries, and obviously everybody on the planet who has any stakes in West Asia is going to be looking at the new regime that comes into play in Tehran in the next couple of weeks. Could you look into the crystal ball and tell us what kind of impact a new regime, a new president would have in the geopolitical situation of the West Asia as it stands today? The proxy wars that the Houthis, Hezbollah, Kataib Hezbollah, Hamas, and this long war with Israel that began from the 7th of October. Your thoughts on this?
Well, if we talk of the proxies, then I think it is the ball in the Israeli court. If they stop the war on Gaza, then these proxies will stop, whether the Houthi, whether the Islamic resistance represented by Hezbollah in Lebanon, or in the Iraq from the Iraqi side. So that is has to be taken by the Israelis and the Americans to end the widening of this regional war. But in terms of the Iranian, as you know, as the constitution, it's a 2-month caretaking ministry now. The presidency will be for 2 months, and within 50 days they have to hold the election and they have to elect a new president, and also there will be a new cabinet. So therefore, we don't see a major changes in the current policy of the government. In fact, even Mohammad Mukhbir is considered to be very close to Khamenei, and he will be following the instruction from the supreme leadership. So therefore, I don't see any major changes. However, the situation internally in Iran, no doubt about it, that there is an internal turmoil because of the economical harsh on Iran, because of the economic sanctions by the West and the United States on Iran, which has a great impact on the Iranian people.
On the people, yes.
On the people of Iran. That's why they are facing these difficulties, and that is why even Iran have no options but to use a very old aircrafts because of the American sanction. In fact, even during the Trump administration, before Trump comes, there was a little bit of relief with signing of the nuclear agreement. But even the European came forward to sell Airbus and other aircraft to Iran. But once the Trump have revoked the accord, immediately they apologized. They couldn't deliver out of the 100 Airbus except the 3. But here it is. They are under sanctions. Still, they are able to stand on their own and to prove that they are geopolitically important in the region. And I will agree on the issues of Indian involvement in the north-south corridors and Indian access into the CIS country, because this is going to have no impact at all on the future relation between India and Iran, because whoever will be on the Iranian side will always support this kind of an accord with India, because Iran have given us throughout, ever since the revolution, they have honored all their agreement with all the countries, and I don't see any problem for the Indian side. The only problem I am pessimistic about it is that dragging Iran into a regional war, as Mr. Prime Minister of Israel, Netanyahu, wanted to bring the Americans into this war. And that's why there was an attack on Iran. Iran countered that attack and attacked on Syria with the Iranian consulate. And then all this, provocation can lead to a regional war. Then we are maybe facing the music of a closing Strait of Hormuz, a Bab el-Mandeb and Red Sea and the Suez Canal. That could have
which is not in anybody's interest.
Grave impact, grave impact on the global and oil trade.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Awwad. Aditya, you had some closing comments.
Just briefly I wanted to mention, because you asked me how New Delhi would be watching the power transition. Ideally, New Delhi and perhaps most of the Western countries would also want a stop to the public executions that have been taking place. Openly over the last many years, we've also seen women being subjected to, human rights violations that have been taking place ever since 22, when the Mahsa Amini case took place. Not just protests, but her killing perhaps in the custody. And Ebrahim Raisi, it might be a sad event. It would be unfortunate event, but we have to call him out for whatever he did as a hardliner. He presided as the Deputy Prosecutor General and killed not hundreds but thousands of communists and leftists around 88, 89. The same Ebrahim Raisi, when he came to power, enforced and did not want men and women to talk to each other when during work environment, and had a hard rule on women. So these protests have escalated. I think the kind of protests that Iran has seen in 22-23 are the worst since 79.
Not seen since 79.
As I said, I don't know what the US and the Israel would be doing now, but as I said, in history, you don't get such opportunities. Such opportunities are rare. To restore order, to restore democracy, how much they can intervene, how much they would want to intervene in a conflict situation like today, has to be seen. And internally, it would be a challenge for them, because they would have to give the leadership not just to the people, but to a force like the IRGC, which is operating in the region and perhaps is their cover in that entire region.
Absolutely. And we can only hope for peace. And while there have been air crashes that altered history, one can only hope that each of these turns of history can only result in peace. And that's, of course, our earnest desire here. But thank you very much for joining us this evening, Dr. Waeil, Awwad, Pathikrit, Payne. We'll continue to track the situation arising out of Iranian President Raisi's untimely death in that helicopter crash on the Iranian border.